are these people?
Speaking of fuck Israel, all right, I decided that I've had enough. I've seen enough. I've talked about it. I've covered a lot of people's articles on this, but I haven't really written about this myself and given it and I've talked about it here. I talked about it during my origin story. I talk about it and I scream about it all day on Twitter, but I haven't really written an article about this. So it's kind of funny because it was on September 10th that I sat down at around noon and started writing this. And about 3/4 of the way through, I found out, just like everybody else did, that I saw the video on Twitter of a big right-wing influencer getting shot through the neck, maybe, allegedly, I don't know. Where, there's 100 different conspiracy theories already about what is going on there and what happened there. I don't know. That's not what this piece is about, because this was already basically written beforehand. I had an idea and a thought on, what was it, Wednesday night, and it was like, how do we properly punish Israel for all that they've done? And the people of Israel as well, for standing by, and most of them at least, encouraging this and not fighting against it to as far as they could to their government. And what I came up with was, how do we not make them a country anymore? Is strip their sovereignty. How do we, in the community of nations, no longer acknowledge or recognize that that place is an actual official country? And that was kind of, how do I back my way into that? Because we all say that Israel must no longer exist, but how? How do you make that happen? So I started writing this, and then it expanded and expanded a little bit more and expanded. I didn't want to make it too long because I want to be able to get through it. I want people to be able to get through it. And I plan on writing more articles that involve this stuff, but I'm going to do a read through here. I may stop a couple times. If Reef, you want to interrupt me, feel free, because I know you had quite a bit to say about this too. But my article is that the Greater Israel Project must never be permitted. All right. By eliminating Israel's right to exist as a sovereign country. And that Israel has a right to exist argument disappears. No, it absolutely doesn't. So now what do you got to say? Vote to strip Israel's sovereignty and no longer recognize it as a country in the United Nations, which is probably the worst way to do it, except that it was created by a UN vote. So how better to take it away than to have the body and entity that first created it remove it? Now, I don't even know if that's possible, and I know that the U.S. and Israel are members that would probably block it anyway, but it's a good thought. And then come the Nuremberg 2.0 trials. All right. So I start out by admitting, and not admitting, but letting everyone know right up front that I am Jewish and that I was raised in the U.S. as a conservative Jew to believe in Israel. Now, I will have to at some point go into the difference between Jewish sects from how at least I was raised to understand them. The Reformed Jews are Jewish like the rapscallion. Right. The Reformed Jews, they're like Jewish light in a way. They're a lot more accepting. They're mostly English in their ceremonies, and they don't do very much Hebrew. And a lot of American Jews are Reformed, but they're looked upon by all the other religious sects within Judaism as kind of Judaism light. Then you have conservative, which is about a mix of English and Hebrew, and that's how I was raised. I spoke Hebrew. No, I don't understand it, but I at least learned how to read it, how to read the words and the syllables and the symbols. So I have some basic, like beyond basic understanding of the culture and history from the way that they wanted to brainwash teach us. And that's what I'm talking about here. So I was raised a conservative Jew. Now the other two are Orthodox. And then you've got like the ultra Orthodox, like the Lubavitch and the Chabad, that are like, we even consider extreme. Within the Jewish community, we all kind of look at each other with the long black coats and the long sideburns, and we go, the majority of Jews think that they're a little extreme, beyond a little extreme, let alone ones that hold secret tunnels, and they know nothing about any of that stuff. They don't look into just how fucked up Chabad Lubavitch has ties to, and this human trafficking stuff that has been alleged, and the stuff with the bloody mattress in the tunnels, and they just explain it away, and they ignore and they whitewash that part because they get benefit from it. And I want to talk a little bit about that. So, as a child, I was taught that Israel was created as a homeland for the Jews after the Holocaust, which I realized several years ago that it was all just a carefully constructed story with a ton of omissions. A lie. That's what they always told us. If you don't tell the whole story, that's a lie. I was only told half the story, which it never acknowledged the suffering inflicted on the inhabitants of the land of Palestine prior to 1948 and ever since. They almost act like it was just an empty place, just this desolate piece of desert that nobody wanted and nobody fought over, and it was ours. The 3,000, I didn't even talk about the 3,000-year argument in this article, so that's something else that I'm writing that down. I have to address at some point. All right. But since 2021, and realizing this, I've become vehemently anti-Zionist and talk about Israel's war crimes frequently on How Do We Miss That and other shows. By the way, that's a link to a playlist for all the episodes and archives if you ever want to listen to any old ones. The last 2 years have revealed how a lot of what we see is orchestrated by and on behalf of the furtherment of Zionism, both Jewish and Christian. Again, refer back to INN News. I'm talking about the Christian Zionists. Zionists try to conflate Judaism with the state of Israel. But I will scream from the rooftops forever that Zionism is not Judaism. How there are more Christian Zionists in the U.S. than there are Jews worldwide. Most Jews I know have never really been shown the difference between what an anti-Zionist Jew is and what we believe. And they've always it's always been conflated also by the Jewish community, not just by the Christian community. Or they're in complete denial that there's a difference. And that's what they're trying to pass laws in this country to say, that Zionism is Judaism, which is insane when more Christians believe in it than Jews. What? Okay, anyway. Judaism existed for thousands of years before Zionism did. It did. That's fact. Straight up fact. Zionists were fighting for the reformation of Israel and Palestine for more than 50 years before it was recreated in 1948. Now, this is a headline from the New York Times from 1899, highlighting the Conference of Zionists electing delegates at their meeting in Baltimore, determining that they will colonize Palestine. Again, this is 1899. And it wasn't even the first one. That's the third annual conference. I'm not an anti-Semite. I'm not a self-hating Jew. I acknowledge history from a objective, logical standpoint. First, Palestinians are Semites too. So to call anyone an anti-Semite means that they're also against the Palestinian people, which when they're defending them, it's kind of silly to say that. Second, okay, I very much do not hate myself or my religion, but I am incensed at how it has been twisted and bastardized to justify countless atrocities and land theft. And I said exactly that on AM Wake Up recently, and there's a link to me saying that and to a short. Now, I am also, obviously, not an advocate for continuing the project of the State of Israel. And there are lots of us growing in number as they realize that what the United States and UK are funding and backing in the name of Israel, but claiming that it's also in the name of Jews, is going to get some people pretty upset with Jews in the end. Don't you think? Maybe? Here's Harry S. Truman explaining the problem in 1949.
The Zionists particularly, who were against anything that was to be done if they couldn't have the whole of Palestine and everything handed to them on a silver plate so they wouldn't have to do anything. It couldn't be done. We had to take it in small doses. You can't move 5 or 6 million people out of a country and fill it up with 5 or 6 million more and expect both sets of them to be pleased. We had all sorts of objections to everything that was done. Something had to be done. We went ahead and done it and had it done, and now it's working out. Eventually, I think we'll have them all satisfied, but it's going to take a great deal of time yet to get the job done. To recognize Israel was an easy one. I had to make a compromise with the Arabs and divide Palestine. The Jews wanted to chase all the Arabs into the Tigris and Euphrates River, and the Arabs wanted to chase all the Jews into the Red Sea. And what I was trying to do was to find a homeland for the Jews and still be just with the Arabs. But when you go into a thing of that kind, the people you help most are the ones that get most angry with you. Both of them were against me on the situation, but as President of the United States, I paid no attention to them, carried out what I thought was right, and I had the support of the Congress, and I could do it, which is unusual in these days.
Could you tell us specifically that a lot of Jewish people were against you, too?
Oh, well, there were a lot of Jewish people against me because they wanted the whole of Palestine. As I say, they wanted to drive all the Arabs into the Tigris and Euphrates rivers.
Which is exactly what they're doing now.
Yep.
They just waited 75 years, and I think that Truman's words, he thought it was going to work out. Well, it worked out for the Zionists. It worked out for, it's funny, he also conflated Zionists with the Jews immediately. By the way, you notice that he said Zionists once or twice, and then he immediately flipped it to the Jews. Again, more Christian Zionists were behind this. The royal family, not Jewish Zionists, Christian Zionists. Zionism is a political ideology, not a religion. Now, of course, October 7th happened. Do you denounce Hamas? Do you denounce October 7th? October 7th is justification for war crimes. And actually, a friend of mine came at me a little bit, and he's like, I think to call it what you did was a little harsh. Said, sorry. After their unabashed collective punishment, which again is a war crime inflicted on millions in the aftermath of a prison break on October 7th, 2023, which saw 1,200 people killed, Israel should no longer be able to continue and exist as a sovereign country. This didn't start October 7th, but the disproportionate response to it is so far beyond disgraceful. I can't even think of the proper word to describe it. It's not disgraceful. It's not awful. It's not the worst thing that you could possibly imagine, to exterminate an entire population systematically by destroying its healthcare system, by starving them, by not allowing aid to come in, by bombing people that are trying to deliver aid to them, by intimidating people through a mass media campaign, etc., all of these things. So, again, let's talk about that prison break. And I will, because we call Gaza an open-air prison for years beforehand, because it was. They couldn't go in or out without Israel's say-so. That makes it a prison. You could say so or not, that they had a life in a city inside of it, but it was still within walls. They weren't allowed to fish, or they'd get bombed. They weren't allowed to leave, or they'd be murdered, or they weren't allowed to come back. So again, let's talk about that prison break, because it's been used by Israel as the justification for everything they've done since. 1,200 people were killed, originally reported as a lie as 1,400, and still used incorrectly by some. All right, including Hamas militants, those also including IDF combatants, and hundreds of Israeli civilians that the IDF murdered, admittedly, with IDF tank and Apache helicopter fire. There's a ton of investigations, and even IDF soldiers admitted that they were given the order. I have Yoav Gallant admitting that it was a mass Hannibal, and I talk about that. Lots of evidence suggests Israeli forces allowed the attack to happen. Dissident wrote an article about that last week. Then used the Hannibal Directive to order IDF soldiers to murder citizens to prevent them from being taken hostage. A mass Hannibal, as described by one IDF soldier, where literally they said that if somebody that was a Hamas fighter went into a house full of a family, they blew up the house with the family in it. By the way, as a reminder, none of this started October 7th. That was all a response to 75 years of oppression and being treated like second-class citizens and being treated like prisoners. And oh yeah, by the way, the most watched and monitored wall in the history of mankind was just happened to not be watched for a 4-hour block that morning when they just happened to be doing this. Okay. There's a ton more to say, but reviewing October 7th wasn't the point of this piece. The multitude of war crimes committed by Israel as a result, and what to do about them, is the point here. That the Zionist version of the Greater Israel Project must never be permitted. They must never be rewarded for the behavior that they've committed here. Countries that commit genocide can't continue to exist. How do we do this? We eliminate Israel's right to exist as a sovereign country for actively destroying Gaza and the West Bank and their multiple acts of war committed on Syria and Lebanon and Iran and Yemen and now Qatar and Tunisia this week. Remember that they dropped a bomb in Qatar to try to murder Hamas delegates that were trying to negotiate a settlement. That in Tunisia, they dropped incendiaries on top of the flotilla that is apparently still going toward Israel. Haven't heard very much about it since they were attacked. All right.
Yeah, I think they just left. Like they hung out in Tunisia for a week.
They were waiting for more people and fix up the boats and fuel up and I guess and load up the boats. All right. But remember that their intent is land theft of other sovereign nations. In addition to Syria and Lebanon, you've got parts of Egypt, Jordan, parts of Iraq, and even parts of Saudi Arabia are part of the Greater Israel Project in the future. All right. All in pursuit of this goal. They will continue to murder people anywhere because they've gotten away with it. This red area.
I don't even think they're going to stop there. This is what they claim they're going to stop. Like, everyone talks about, how Putin's going to, he's not going to stop there. But no one wants to think Israel has world domination fantasy. They totally do. So,
well, the problem is you create a border like that. That's a lot of border to protect against all these countries that aren't too happy that you took land from them. So
land from them.
I don't know.
But don't worry, we'll give them all the ammunition to be able to fucking hold out, and then we'll probably have to boots on the ground ourselves at some point, just to help them out.
Oh, there's no doubt. This is a U.S., UK, Australia. This is a Five Eyes project right here, for sure. And then they'll get German troops and French troops and everybody involved.
Ukrainian troops.
They'll all give them a little piece of the Greater Israel Project.
Yeah.
A country that treats the people they occupy, imprisoning them, starving them, and never allowing them to return if they leave, the way that Israel has for 75 plus years, should not exist, let alone be permitted by the international community to expand by murdering more people and stealing more land? How do you think they're going to treat the Syrians and the Lebanese people who refuse to leave the land that they're stealing right now? They're going to turn them into Palestinians and then keep squeezing them into smaller and smaller patches of land, gaslighting everyone into saying, well, they're the problem. They're the criminals because they're fighting the people that stole their land. Why would you fight us? Just lay down. Just let us take it. We're taking it.
Right.
They've committed so many war crimes, it's not even possible to list them all, but there actually is a list somewhere, and this is a website out of Common Dreams. All right. This is the litany of Israel war crimes that is being documented by the Palestine Red Crescent Society, okay, and others. So, what steps do we take to accomplish this? We vote to strip Israel's sovereignty at the United Nations and no longer recognize it as a country. And maybe they do it at the BRICS conference because they know that the U.S. will block anything here, but the U.S. doesn't have a vote at BRICS. Well, China does, and we'll talk about that in a second, but that further, by removing their sovereignty, though, that would further make them rogue criminals, which they already are. It'll send a message to every other country who even thinks about it. But they don't want to do that, I guess. When Israel refuses and acts defiant, UN peacekeeping staff should arrest the cabinet heads, the entire Knesset. Their government gets disbanded. Israel attacked heads of other countries. Nobody asked what would happen to the people of those countries once that happened.
Right.
Because I guarantee the next question is, well, what happens to the citizens of Israel? You know what? Fuck them. They allowed that to devolve into chaos, and we shouldn't ask that question here.
We're all talking about assassinations, but if you look up assassination in Israel, Wikipedia has to separate it out by decade.
Yeah, I saw that.
So,
all right. The Syrian people didn't get a choice in self-determination when their leader Assad was run off in a revolution funded by the CIA and MI6, allegedly, putting a former Al-Qaeda operative, Al-Jilani, in charge of the fucking country, who's been literally completely subservient to Israel ever since. And Israel has continued to expand their land grab into Syria. The Lebanese people didn't get a choice when Nasrallah was murdered. The Yemeni people didn't get a choice when Israel murdered their entire cabinet last week. Unreal. And I had somewhere a tweet from Alan McLeod. I think, you know what? It's up here. This is it right here. No, right there. Incredible to watch the Charlie Kirk shooting receive about 100 times more media coverage than Israel assassinating the Prime Minister of Yemen.
Yep.
Then we start the Nuremberg 2.0 trials. Broadcast live to the world, no private testimony. Those trials would have to include the Western politicians who ran cover and were complicit, including Biden and Trump as commanders-in-chief of a military that provided support, including U.S. politicians that were rabidly on TV and screaming about this and voting to send money there. People like Nikki Haley and Tulsi Gabbard, Randy Fine, we all know him, Josh Gottheimer and Hakeem Jeffries and Cory Booker, Lindsey Graham and Chuck Schumer. Again, this is bipartisan. All right, Bernie Sanders and Nancy Pelosi, just to name a few. All of these people advocated for and or voted to send weapons and money to Israel and continue their slaughter. And a guy by the name of Charlie Kirk.
Above the law.
Oh no, he can't testify anymore. Sorry. Including Keir Starmer, Kid Starver, who, while acting indignant publicly, is still providing spy flights to Israel daily over Gaza and authorizing the use of the Incirlik base in Cyprus in support of Israel murdering, starving, unarmed Palestinian civilians under the guise of eliminating Hamas, which the U.S. military, by the way, concedes that they'll never be able to do, including all the foreign secretaries the past 2 years, like David Lammy, like Yvette Cooper. Here's a tweet that our friend Gordon Dimmack reposted from Keir Starmer, who condemned Israel's strikes on Doha. Like I said, they attacked the Hamas negotiators in Qatar. They violated Qatar's sovereignty and risked further escalation across the region on purpose. As this person reminded them, you literally sent the fucking RAF to refuel the Israeli fighter jets that bombed Qatar, mate. What are you doing? We've got the flight logs. And then including Axel Scholz and Friedrich Merz and Emmanuel Macron. 3 months ago, Germany and France say Israel is entitled to defend itself. Well, Again, if it's not officially recognized as a country, does it? Probably not. Also including Xi Jinping, who could punish Israel by refusing to allow China to do business with Israel very easily. Almost, what is that? 20 billion. I don't know why that.
China.
And almost $20 billion of Israel's imports come from China. And it's more than double their closest, largest trading partner, which would be the United States. That's what an actual BDS would be. BDS is effective. It works. Also including the media figures and decision makers at media outlets that whitewash the war crimes and both sides the situation. At every major corporate network. Piers Morgan, are you listening? This from Double Down News. Not a single mainstream newspaper or broadcaster has said a thing about Israel carving Star of Davids into Gaza with their bulldozers. Israel can ethnically cleanse an entire people and raise their everything to the ground, then mark their territory to show in a show of racial and religious supremacy, and not a peep. Wild. And there's 4 examples that they're showing.
Yep.
Silence is complicity. Lying on behalf of the murderers and allowing them to continue their lifestyle unimpeded and unchallenged will not be tolerated. We used to hold people to a much higher standard when it came to a country stealing land and murdering unarmed people. I think it's time to start holding people to that standard again. So, now I'll breathe again. But this has gotten, some action. I was hoping it would piss some people off. It really hasn't pissed very many off. It's gotten a lot of support, which I appreciate. So if you're over at Substack, go to indiemediatoday.com and give it a like, give it a share, give it a restack. Let other people know that it's there, and share that with people. Hopefully there are more anti-Zionist Jews like me that speak out, that write about this. And I think there have been some. I think Alon Mizrahi has been writing about it, and they're having, again, Aaron Mate and Max Blumenthal, and they break stories, but they don't really talk about it from their perspective, and as somebody still having Israel use their own religion to claim the justification for murder on a daily basis. Murdering 100 people a day because of this religious nonsense. And
you could outlaw religion and most of these sex crimes would disappear in a couple of generations.
But we don't have time for rational solutions. Thank you, St. George.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I'm guessing that
Yeah,
Israel-friendly YouTube.
They're using my religion. I'll get rid of it. Fuck that. I don't need that shit.
Right.
You know?
Well, concludes this week's Fuck Israel segment. YouTube doesn't like it when we talk about this, and they don't want to turn monetization back on. So there are other ways to support INN and support the show. The ways to do that are using Cash App. That's a mobile app. $, Indie News Network is how you find us. Co-fee.com is a website you go to, and you can put in a credit card and give us $5 or $10 or however many coffees you want to buy for the network. Then you got paypal.com, and you go to paypal.me /Indie News Network. And then we've got indienewsnow.com. We've got a whole news website that aggregates over 100 sources on a 24/7, 365 basis, and go check that out. And then at Substack, I do publish. That article was just at indiemediatoday.com. So you can see it there. We're also live there now. And then INNnewsletter.com. We're going to be live in about an hour for boats smashing into other boats. So I hope everybody appreciates the article. I appreciate all the feedback, man. Again, it took a lot to pour into. It might cost me some friendships and relationships once that starts to circulate around. But some of this stuff, like, again, I can't stay. Silence is complicity. If you're staying silent right now, what are you doing? Like, you know, Aaron Bushnell. I think back to Aaron Bushnell's words about, what would you be doing if you ever wondered what you'd be like?
Be complicit.
Or that if you ever wondered what you'd be doing during a genocide, you're doing it right now. Yeah. So that's what I'm doing. And slowly working to bring along the people that are close to me that still believe in all this nonsense, because sadly there are too many of them. And maybe stuff like that will help to wake them up. I don't know. It also serves to provide ample evidence that there are Jewish people that really do feel like all of this is being spun and manipulated to eventually create a backlash on Jewish people so that they have nowhere else to go but the Greater Israel Project. You know, that's been a historical thing for generations, that they did it prior to 1948, that they were getting Israelis kicked out of all the Arab nations because there were Jewish terrorist groups that were trying to terrorize other Jews to leave and to go to set up in Palestine. That's documented fact. That's, again, I'll get into some of that stuff in a future article. Yeah, I mean, carbon filters are over $1,000 right now in Gaza, Sean. It's unbelievable. You know, again, anything that is of value there right now, and I don't know how they're transacting. That's a whole other question, because internet power is cut off and they're getting solar stuff. How do they, you know, eSIM cards, I guess. It's so challenging. And then you've got Israel tracking signals. Go ahead.
We've covered how, you know, the physical money there is just literally deteriorating and being blown up. Like, so, you know, they push digital currencies there. They're, you know, like cash apping each other, that kind of stuff. But
they're going to end up, you know, again, that's what the goal of the Gaza, you know, city rebuild is, that they want to enforce full digital ID and digital currency. So there won't be, it'll be a cashless city, a cashless society, whatever the, you know, you want to, that is where they're going to try to institute their utopia, which is gross. I love you all. Support independent media, because we need it more than ever. And we will see you real soon. Take care, everyone.
See you in a bit, fam.
Hasta la vista. Hasta la vista, baby.
No! We just fucking lost the stream!
I guess this isn't such an awful place. Is that what you want?